the third largest economy. We are playing in the big league now. We need to think like we play in the big league, which means that we have got to have a capacity to play in the big league in the knowledge economy too, because that's where a lot of the incremental growth is coming from. And we can't do that if we do not have a patenting, trademark and other ecosystems that are in genuine global scale. So that is the first thought. Now, in order to do that, obviously we need to make a lot of changes, and the report talks about process changes and many other things. But this is a panel on capacity building, i.e. in the human capital needed for this. And I'm going to speak specifically here about the fact that we simply need more people to be doing this. I mean, within the government, in the patent office itself, and that's Unnat's job. And but also, as you mentioned, the wider ecosystem of lawyers, people in the science community who know how to patent, and so on and so forth. So just to give you some idea of what I mean, India has right now in the patent office about 850 people. That includes examiners, controllers, and various other staff around them as well. Now, just to put it in context, we are competing with America, which has 8,500, and China, which has 13,500. Now, would we be able to compete on the cricket field if the other team was sending 13 players in and we were not even sending one player in? No. So at the very least, we've got to have enough players in there to even compete. Forget about, And so we've got to stop thinking that we need to grow in 10%, 20%, 30%. We've got to think in terms of growing 100%, 200%. So if you read the report, you will see that one of the things that I've asked for in terms of sheer human capacity, in terms of hiring in, I have talked about the number of around 2,000 people. You can take the number you think that can be, at what pace at which we can absorb. But I'm hoping that what I have achieved by this is to get the government to think in terms of orders of magnitude as opposed to percentages. And so here immediately we come to this next problem is, okay, let's say we in a few years time have 3,000 people in the patent office instead of 850. Where are we going to get these people? In this, I have a somewhat idiosyncratic view, which is that we Indians spend too much time beating ourselves about the fact that we can't get capacity, we can't find people.
Bright.
If you go back to China 15 years ago, they also didn't have people who knew how to do all this patenting stuff. And if you go and meet them, and I happen to have spent a good part of my life living in East Asia, working and during the phase of their high growth, most of the people they hired into doing various things, not just in patenting, whether it's running their factories and building highways and building high-speed railways, most of those people had never done that either before. And that must have been true at some point in time in history of, in the case of Western countries as well. Germany was completely destroyed after the Second World War. The people who built Germany that you see there in the 1960s,
Just advisor.
the people who spent their childhood actually fighting a war. They weren't getting trained in anything. So my own view is, let's not start with this view that we can't find people, our people are not good enough. I'm sorry, they are more than good enough. I had the opportunity of going and spending some time in Dwarka in the office there. And I interacted with some of the young kids who work there. There are people who do this examination are usually people in the age group of 25 to 30.
Yes.
I spent some time with them. Let me assure you, they are more than good enough.
Yes. Thank you, sir.
Now, we need to give them some training.
Yes.
Some of that training obviously will be done when we get them in. But there is a case for giving them a leg up before they come into the system at all. And for that, if you read the report, and otherwise also I talked with Unnat and I think Himang as well, about that we can give them sort of a leg up by creating some short certificate courses, maybe a 6-month course.
Yes.
Where they learn some of the basics before they come, so that they're not, one, they're not coming blind, and two, there is there is some awareness about this as being a possible job opportunity, not just in the government but outside as well. Now these certificate courses, I believe there already some thought is being given to design them. I don't know, Unnat, is that the case? Some thought is being given to design them. My own view is that these should be no more than 6-month courses that should run parallel. People should be able to do it while they are doing their engineering, science and other courses. And I think they don't have to be perfect when they get there. You'll still have to give them a little bit of training when they get in. That's fine. But you will get people who are good enough and can be deployed enough. Young people going into at least the examiner level should be more than good enough. And then, not everybody will stay. We shouldn't get emotional about this. Because there are career options outside, and in fact, as the wider ecosystem of the IP grows, we should expect many of these examiners, even controllers, going out and making a living for themselves in the wider world. That is not a bad thing. That's a good thing. That's in fact, if anything, we are building the ecosystem. And we should expect, after all, we are happy to create Agniveer scheme for a armed service. Why not think of this as Agniveer scheme for IP system?
Yes. Patent Ratna milega.
Let people keep flowing through.
Patent
We should
Ratna.
be continuously bringing people in. They should be going out and making careers in the private sector. Maybe some of them will go out and do an LLB and become a lawyer. Whatever it is, point is, we need to have a healthy expansionist view about this, rather than say, oh, hum logon ko log nahi milenge, ye nahi hoga. Utter rubbish. As I said, rest of the, I can assure you, 1:1, our average IP person in examiner that you are hiring, 1:1 is better than the average IP person that the Chinese are hiring into their system, or even the Americans are hiring.
Yes.
So let us not get emotional about this. Let's expand. As the Honorable Justice Singh mentioned, this is a business that makes money. I can assure you, as somebody who spent 5 years as principal economic advisor in the finance ministry, this is not something the finance is going to try and strangle. They make money out of this. So do not let finance considerations strangle this expansion. If anything, I can assure you will get support from the Ministry of Finance in expanding, because as I mentioned, given the huge backlog there is, just opening up this backlog actually is a hugely cash positive activity for the government itself, from purely a money making perspective, revenue making perspective. So I think here we have an opportunity of, I think in 5 years time, we should be doing 1 lakh patents a year. That should be our target. With that, let me hand it back.
Thank you so much for your opening remarks, Mr. Sanyal. We'll come to the specific recommendations that you've made in the report during this discussion. But before going there, I would like to request Shri Deepak Baglaji to tell us, as the CEO of Invest India, how do you think investment...
And you're absolutely right. Much of the reason violation happens that people are just not aware what to do even if you are aware. So, sort of a digital directory of this material, which is easily searchable, would be a very, very useful thing to do. As I said, there are 2 parts of it. One of course, we are thinking in terms of just the owner of the IP issue and how to protect him and get him the money. But do remember that the buyer of the IP is also using it and making money out of that. In fact, much of the multiplication of the power of the IP is coming from person who goes through the huge, let's say, since you talked about music, you know, if I am a music ad maker, I'm hunting through all kind of discovered the thing I want. It's actually cheaper for me to just take it, pay the guy 5 lakhs and take it and get on with it, and get on to my next ad, than hang around stuck with that ad, trying to fix it. So I think this is a piece, I would consider it a piece of infrastructure, IP infrastructure. It's not very complicated to do it. It's just a directory that allows it create categories, and you can do that with all kinds of IPs and put them in there so that people can click on them. And by the way, many of these things also go off their IP period, off copyright, And so they should also be clearly marked that at this point in time it no longer is freely available. So even if I want to use it, I don't know whether at which point did it go off copyright. Is it still copyright? I don't know. So there is, and by the way, I am a writer. I face this all the time for other reasons. I need to use a photograph for one of my books. I need to use a passage from somewhere. There's complete confusion about who owns it. Is it alive? Not alive? And so on. So all of this can be easily sorted by having a simple IP directory where this democratization can be done. It's not a complex thing, a good search engine and categorization, and then you keep dumping the new stuff in there, GI or whatever it is. And by the way, the rest of the world will also use it. Not just in India, that you will find somebody sitting in Finland who likes a particular thing, a utility patent of some sort, he pays it, takes it and gets on with it. So I think your idea is absolutely right. Creation of a digital, easily searchable digital directory of IP would be a very good step. As I said, it doesn't require a huge amount of technology. It's just basically a website with a server which keeps all this data and search engine, and whoever designs it in the beginning should have a simple architecture for search to be able to look for stuff.
Mr. Bhatia, how do you think we can promote our GIs internationally and make more monetary contribution to these communities who own these GIs?
So ma'am, this is very interesting, the point which you picked up. By the way, Sanjeev, I must tell you, it's fascinating working with startups. They always have a solution and they always have an out-of-box solution. So we already have a startup in Chandigarh, which is an AI-based startup, which is collecting this as a platform on the IP side, which is happening, and the World Economic Forum also recently acknowledged their work. So this is started, but I'll tell you what was more interesting. 2018, just before the pandemic, we had a few of these startups in the room, and we were asking them when your scaling part was concerned and what else will be, what the future will be like to a requirement. And it was very interesting because one of them mentioned, and they made an entire interesting thought presentation on it, that each one of us soon enough will be an IP holder, because you will be selling your personal data to somebody who needs it for marketing, and each one of you will be paid for it. That means we are 1.4 billion today, we'll be 1.6 billion 2047. Just imagine the complexity what you have to deal with at that point of time. And one of the first places where that will happen very soon will be in India, because you're the largest reservoir of data on an individual basis. Now we have to deal with that situation. And the point which they raised, that a large part of your cases, in quotes, for example, I'm told on the marriage side or on the accident side, are already being digitized. You can come on to that, feed it the details, and you get something which people... So that's when one of the thoughts which they had suggested would be that, to look at it from that perspective. Because a bulk of those cases at that point of time, and I would say 90%, do not require maybe that high level of technicality. Maybe there would be just very mundane ones which could be just required. So all what I'm saying is, as far as the commercialization where we are concerned, ma'am, I think we are trying to see at best, as I said, those R&D centers, what is coming out of them, and doing a fast track to commercialization. There's a special program called AGNI, the Accelerated Growth of New India Innovation, which is again under the Principal Scientific Advisor to the Prime Minister. What we are doing there is we are picking up innovations both outside in the private sphere and the public sphere, and doing a fast track to commercialization as fast as possible. But yes, that's just a beginning. A lot more has to be done, and a totally out of the box thought process which needs to be brought in.